And we're back. How did you do with that? Here are the head nouns from the previous slide: birds, cats, dogs, and countries. And hopefully you wrote them down so that you can make it easier for yourself, or you have it still up on the screen or something. So, as I said before, the head noun is the kind of thing that the subject is. And we need to know which is the head noun because that was what the verb agrees with. Okay, speaking of verbs, take a look at the last sentence from our head noun slide. Many different countries have hosted the Olympics. There are two verbs in this sentence: have, sort of one, and hosted, the second one. So each of them is a verb in its own right, but they do something in particular in combination. That is, they tell us about a particular tense, and they work in combination. In this combination, the verb have gives, this is complicated, so if you don't get it the first time, you can read up on it. The verb have gives the time relative to the time of speaking. So if I'm speaking now, I say many countries have hosted the Olympics. I'm not talking about something that's happening right now. I'm talking about something that has happened in the past, entirely in the past, relative to when I'm speaking now. So hosted tells us the kind of thing that happened. It's like a head noun in some senses, in that it gives us the kind of thing that happened, and then has tells us when it happened, or have tells us when it happened relative to now, relative to the speaking time. So if we leave out either verb, the sentences are still grammatical, but they mean something different. So many different countries hosted the Olympics. It's subtly different from many different countries have hosted the Olympics. And many different countries have the Olympics means something quite different. It's a much more general kind of statement. So please see page XX of your text. It's still in chapter 1, and I'll put a note on the website if you're having trouble finding it. Let me know if you're having trouble finding it. That's an omission. I should have fixed that. Okay. So many countries have hosted the Olympics. The have in the example sentence is called an auxiliary verb. You may have heard of it also as a helper verb. There are two kinds of auxiliaries: tense auxiliaries like have, that tells you when something happened relative to now, at the speaking time, that is. And they can look into the future as well. So they can tell you something happened in the past, is happening right now, is an auxiliary verb, or will happen in the future. So will gives us the future. Tense auxiliaries. There's the other modal auxiliaries. Modals are tricky to think about, like they're hard to define, but they're very easy to identify. So modal auxiliaries give information about the possibility or necessity of something happening. So they don't give us tense information, they give us sort of would, should, could information, if you know what I mean. So let's look at tense auxiliaries first. Jane has eaten her lunch. So think about it for a minute. If we're looking at this, which would be the auxiliary and which would be the verb that tells us the kind of event that has happened? So the tense auxiliary tells us that at this present time, the action described by the main verb has been completed. So has is the tense auxiliary, and the auxiliary always comes before what I'm going to call the main verb, the one that tells us what kind of event it is. So we always see the subject, then the tense auxiliary, and then the main verb. And if we have a modal auxiliary, this is just a note, modal auxiliary will always come before the tense auxiliary. So I can say, Jane could have eaten her lunch, but I don't know, right? So we can't say Jane could eaten her lunch, just wrong. So notice the tense auxiliary has to be followed by a special form of the main verb. It's called a participle. So you can't say Jane has eat her lunch, Jane has eaten her lunch. It has to be eaten. This is the past participle of the verb eat. So there are a few verbs which can be tense auxiliaries, not many. There are be auxiliaries, am, is, are, was, were. And that's things like, what's happening? What is happening? That's a be auxiliary. And so it ends in ing, like happening, or I am shaken. No, that's not right. I can't remember any off the top of my head that end in en. So you see the fallibility of the professor. There are also have auxiliaries, has, had, have. These occur with main verbs ending in en or ed. So I have eaten. She has kicked me 12 times already. So kicked is ed, eaten is en. There's also do auxiliaries, and these are often used for emphasis. These occur with unconjugated verbs. So it's things like, what did you eat? What did you eaten? What did you eating? What did you kicked? Always, what did you eat? Just no ending. Unconjugated means there's no ending on the verb. So most of these can also be main verbs. So what you have to look for when you're identifying these is there a main verb after the auxiliary? So it's not enough to stop reading the auxiliary. You have to read until the end of everything you think is the verb phrase. All right, modal auxiliaries. Jane might eat her lunch. So the modal auxiliary describes a situation that could happen but will not necessarily happen. And what's interesting about these modal auxiliaries is that they always occur before an unconjugated verb. So again, if we look down to the bottom, you can read through these examples and just pause the video. Jane might eaten her lunch is wrong, and Jane must eaten her lunch. Eat or eaten her lunch is wrong. Like Jane might kicked my sister. Both wrong. No endings on verbs that go with modal auxiliaries. So there are only a few modal auxiliary verbs. This is the list. Might, may, must, can, could, shall, should, will, would, have to, ought to, am going to. They always occur with an unconjugated main verb. This list is in your textbook, but you can copy this down if you want to as well. Okay, we covered a lot of ground. I suggest you watch this a couple of times. And certainly if you have questions, put them on the discussion board, send me an email, ask questions. A lot of it will become clear when you're doing your group work, because I've chosen songs for all of you. Why songs? Because they have simple chord structure. I've chosen songs for all of you that have a lot of these things going on. So you're going to get good at identifying them. And I'm going to ask, as you see on the assignment page, I'm going to ask you to use all these terms when you're working on those songs. So our terms are things like subject and noun. So subjects contain nouns. Verb phrases contain main verbs and auxiliary verbs, actually in the other order. Auxiliary verb first, then main verb. If there is no auxiliary verb, the main verb agrees in number with the head noun. Got it? If there is a tense auxiliary verb, it agrees in number with the head noun. So we're looking at verbs always changing in response to nouns. Modal auxiliaries never change form. So it's like saying, my sister, one singular, can jump puddles. My sisters can jump puddles. Versus my sister is jumping. My sisters are jumping. You see what I mean? Okay. What to do? Check the group assignments page. Start doing the markup. This is actually not relevant, so I'm going to cut it out. The second thing. Look at each other's responses. Figure out your wiki. Now is the time to start working on your wiki. At least everyone should have do something by Thursday, because I want to have time to give you feedback so you can keep working on it. So I will be looking at your work. You're getting this stuff on Monday. You've got to have something going by Thursday. Okay?